Hello all, thank you for being here today for this Hopkins at Home event. I'm Gabrielle Zine, the William Cromwell Curator of Rare Books and Manuscripts at the Sheridan Libraries, and I welcome you to what promises to be a wonderful conversation about Black life in Baltimore through the lens of some beautiful photographs by John Clark Maiden. He's a born and bred Baltimore artist who has been documenting the city since the early 1970s. We are fortunate to be able to provide access at the Sheridan Libraries to the John Clark Maiden collection. So I want to begin by thanking the Mayden family for donating this extraordinary collection to Johns Hopkins. We also want to thank supporters of the Sheridan Libraries who make events like this possible. The Friends of the Libraries also support student learning and help the university to build a more diverse and inclusive repository so that we can better understand and highlight the stories of groups who have historically been excluded. There's a link on your screen right now for more information about Friends activities and membership. Before I introduce our two main presenters, Mr. Maiden and Bloomberg Distinguished Professor Lawrence Jackson, I'd like to say a bit about some other ways you can get to know Mr. Maiden's work. Last October, the Sheridan Libraries opened City People, Black Baltimore and the Photographs of John Clark Maiden, an exhibition of over 50 of the prints from the Maiden collection, plus a smaller complementary display of historic materials from our Africana Archives collections. I was co-curator, along with PhD candidate in history Christina Thomas, through the Denis Family Curatorial Fellowship. You can't see Christina right now, but she's here with us, and I want to recognize her essential contributions to that effort. In addition to working with me on the physical exhibition, Christina created a digital storytelling map, a short documentary video, and a longer print interview with Mr. Maiden that was published in the Hopkins Review. Links to the documentary video and the Hopkins Review interview are on the Hopkins at Home website, and so is the link to the award-winning book published by the Johns Hopkins University Press to complement the exhibition. That book, Baltimore Lives, offers really gorgeous reproductions of 100 of Mr. Maiden's photos and is a 2019 winner of an Indies Award recognizing the best books published by independent and university presses. John Clark Maiden grew up in West Baltimore and is a graduate of Northwestern High School. He first learned to use a camera as a reporter at WMAR-TV, where he managed to get the staff photographers to teach him and was given access to the station's darkroom. He went on to earn a BA in Politics and Fine Arts at Ohio Wesleyan University, and then his Juris Doctorate from the University of Baltimore School of Law. Although he's practiced law for about 40 years, most recently as chief solicitor in the Baltimore City Solicitor's Office, Mr. Maiden never stopped taking pictures, walking the city streets before and after work to shoot, and spending many late nights and weekends in his home studio. He's a film photographer, not digital, so that means he develops all his own film and prints his own work, a process that he might illuminate during this conversation. His interest as a photographer is in capturing and honoring everyday life as a way to make visible what is often overlooked or undervalued, especially the survival and strength of Black people and communities that are negatively affected by social, economic, and political neglect. His work has been exhibited at the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Walters Art Museum, the UB Blake Cultural Center, and the Baltimore Museum of Art, among other national and international venues. Dr. Lawrence Jackson is Bloomberg Distinguished Professor of English and History at Johns Hopkins and the founder and director of the Billie Holiday Project for Liberation Arts, which is designed to foster cultural connections between Johns Hopkins and Baltimore City. Dr. Jackson is the author of a 2017 biography of the writer Chester Himes that won an Edgar Award and was a finalist for both an NAACP Image Award and the PEN/Faulkner Award for Nonfiction. It also captured the attention of the Guggenheim Foundation, which made Dr. Jackson one of their Guggenheim Fellows this past year. He is the author of 3 other award-winning books of biography and criticism and is working on 2 new books right now. And he's a prolific contributor to larger public conversations about Baltimore, race, and history through pieces published in Harper's Magazine, the New York Times Book Review, the Washington Post, Baltimore Magazine, and others. The roots of today's conversation, however, go back much further in time. Dr. Jackson is a West Baltimore native who attended city schools, worked at the Druid Hill YMCA and the Maryland Conservation Corps, taught in the Department of Parole and Probation, and is a lifelong congregant at St. James Church in Lafayette Square. He and Mr. Maiden have been family friends for over 30 years. The people and places in these photographs are familiar to both of them, and it is through this perspective that today's conversation takes place. Thanks to both of you for being here today. I'll turn things over to you now, Dr. Jackson.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. It's a joy to be here this afternoon with my longtime friend, John Clark Mayden. I'm Lawrence Jackson, and when I returned to Baltimore, one of the things that I wanted to do was to figure out the best ways, most productive ways to preserve Baltimore's remarkable history. And the first person that I thought of in that context was John Maiden, who had been taking photographs since I was in junior high school. And I would visit his home on Linden Avenue. And so I went over to John's house one afternoon and I said, John, what are you doing with all of these remarkable photographs that you've been taking over so many years? And is there maybe a way that we could do something together with them? And we had a really productive conversation. And over a period of about 30 months or so, John decided to give some of the portraits from his collection to the Hopkins Library so that scholars and researchers and enthusiasts will be able to have access to them for the foreseeable future at least. And also we're able to publish a book, Baltimore Lives. And I think it's a really remarkable testament to John's artistry. So welcome here today, John. And we're social distancing, but we're really excited about being together at this time.
Yes. Thank you, Larry. It's good to do this, and I'm particularly excited because we've known each other for a long time. 1970 does begin the beginning of my photographic journey, and there's a lot to be seen and to be said about what's documented in the pictures.
Okay, well, let's get to a couple questions, and then we'll have opportunity for the audience to weigh in. I'll move this down, but this is an example of some of the work that we're doing between Hopkins and the city. And again, our efforts are to preserve the Black archival record. And we have a couple, I think, of very exciting new contributions to our library. Should be forthcoming. I won't, get ahead of myself and make an announcement, but I'm very excited about some collections that may be coming in. John, let's begin by going straight into your work. When we look at this 1972 photograph, the spirit, the energy here reminds me of the work of someone like Edwin Rostam, who was a WPA photographer and whose photography combined with the writing of Richard Wright produced, sort of these really groundbreaking works that came out in the 1940s, but these WPA realist photographers, capturing the Depression and the movements of African Americans from the rural South into the city. There seems to be a dimension of this in your work, and I'm wondering about photographers and a sensibility that has influenced you. And I'm of course thinking about people like William Parks and William Carrano. Photographers keep their soul, their spirit, their feelings. I was young, 1972, walking down Pennsylvania Avenue. Photography, for me, at that point in time, was a direct relationship to the subject matter. So I kind of call that a one-shot, a portrait of going right in there and taking portrait of the people. Their activity was the most important thing to me, and surrounding them in the gray values of tone and just highlighting that so that it was clear what was going on, who's doing it, and where they are. You're such an expert photographer and artiste. But let me ask you, I'm going to go into this a little bit more, sort of later on in the conversation. You've already mentioned the gray values. Would you talk a little bit about the technical artistry that goes into producing a portrait that's that rich and complex?
Well, primarily, the focal point is having good tonal qualities through developing the film so that you have a lot of middle grays. What you want is a range. It'll come out more in some of the subsequent pictures, but blacks, a lot of middle grays so that you can highlight the emotions that you're expressing through the tonal qualities that are there. And that's what we've done by being sensitive and selecting the chemistry that highlights those elements.
So, I was looking through your book earlier today and yesterday, and really thinking about some of the contrasts and what that could be, what that could be saying about again the artist's journey. But I find it fascinating, and I will just go back just to so everybody sees what we're talking about. So you have this shot, again the pair, two figures, two conspirators, the conversation on the stoop. This is the essence of Baltimore, right? I mean, that we are stoop dwellers. I can remember even though we didn't have marble steps, we had concrete steps on Dofield. I can remember how much joy we had, bunching 7 or 8 of us on 2 or 3 steps, right? I mean, the confraternity. But nonetheless, this photograph taken about the same time, also with the pair, also on the stoop, has this incredible contrast in terms of the sharpness of the colors and of the detail. The step conference, and then we have maybe what people would think of as one of your most extraordinary photographs, twins.
Yes. My first job was washing marble steps, and that's how I would get my money.
You and Billie Holiday
For movie Met Theater at Pennsylvania Avenue and North Avenue. These gentlemen are on Pennsylvania Avenue, just south of the Royal Theater, and this is a couple of years after the riots. It's important that social justice is at the forefront right now, where you have Black Lives Matters. And I was moved by these gentlemen that are wearing hats and are actually well dressed, sitting in a storefront that had been burned out during the riots. And you see the word "time," which is the title of the portrait, which was really significant for several reasons. The phrase was "seize the time." The Black Panthers at that time was saying that as a rally call for it's time for us to assert political pressure. I edited out "seize the" and I left "time" because that's what I felt when I did it. And the middle values of gray are predominant there, with faded white that you see in the background, with in the forefront right-hand corner, you see the Sun newspaper, and you see that I went heavy a little bit with the pavement because I wanted you to feel the stains and the lines, because all of that are contributors to the mood, to the play off of their expressions and the relationship between the two.
And people have commented that this is also a generational photo. Would you say something about what the composition means to you if you have two figures who, sort of a cursory glance, you might think, oh, these guys are the same generation, but not really?
No, I don't. I think what they're doing is the same thing.
Okay.
And they're passing time together in life and run out the aftermath of a riot situation, but they've taken it day by day. And they don't seem to be so beaten down that they can't have a smile.
I've looked at the photograph a little bit, and I keep thinking that you have one person, who in hand on the staff, the dignified composure, the wingtip shoes, the elegant white beard. Somebody who maybe has made this successful transition from the rural South, from the agricultural interior to the urban present, and then we have whatever is the particular dissolution of radicalism, and then the gentleman with the hat. I was going to go upstairs and get my hat, man. Live out some of our images. But the gentleman in the hat, seems again, in my mind's eye, he connotes for me the rich jazz artistry that Pennsylvania Avenue was known for. This sort of maybe nostalgic moment for many for the 1950s, and sort of this really, really sharp contribution, especially with the music. But of course, by '68, we're into a different kind of a mood, perhaps even in decline. And he's almost the person who is moving in the direction of maybe the 1,000-yard stare. But that's the literary person to me. He wanted to have an interpretation.
Well, I think that interpretation is a good thing, and I accept that once I could compose a picture and put together the documented event, that it's for you to read into it what you see into it. And that's a good thing. So I can only smile.
I wanted to just mention two of my favorites, and of course, this is because I'm a 1970s child, right? And when I see this image, the Untitled Boy, again, 1972, 1974. First of all, I had that jacket, and I can remember trying out for baseball at Pembroke Junior High School. We had that jacket on. It was a cold March day, trying to make the catch, and then of course the hair. Because when I used to have hair, that was sort of like, that's the default for everybody. Before you got the comb on it, it was gonna have its own shape. But that image certainly captures something for me, something wan and wistful, something really, really quite beautiful. I had the great fortune of listening to you have a rich conversation about this image, and I did want to ask you to revisit it. This shot of Kenny and the shoulders and the hat. And of course, in one way, the thing that it brings back immediately, there was a partner of mine who lived on Allen Road who always had that hat on. Now, this would be a little bit later. This is like going from the 70s into the 80s, but he always wore that hat. And then, of course, it reminds me of, one of the characters from Fat Albert, who, always had the hat pulled down over his ears and everything. But would you talk a little bit about this photograph on Ruskin Avenue of Kenny?
Yes, it brings back good and some sad memories because Kenny is no longer alive. Be that as it may, the tonal quality is fabulous. When you look at the shirt that he's wearing, the folds of the t-shirt, together with the hat, the light middle values of gray, where at the top you can see a highlight because of the direct sun. He's looking forward, and you see row houses, which is what Ruskin Avenue is, and you see somebody walking towards him. The bricks, urban life, the fence that is his backyard, and it just brings together a lot of feeling about being in the neighborhood, the city, and Kenny was always inquisitive. So that was consistent with the person that is taking up 50% of the frame. There's a lot of information in a small amount of space, but the tonal qualities, the middle values are predominant, and they work quite well. I love the threshold moment in the photograph, that you have the image of the young person on the threshold, mounting the fence, straddling, about to cross over into another world, but partially pulled back. It's always things that one is quite special. If I could ask our folks to pull in on this, but I wanted to ask John a question about this image, which is entitled, sort of quite modestly, and in an understated way, it's called Beauty. And when I see the image of that young woman that's on the cover of your book, I know that it's very powerful, very important to you. It calls to mind immediately to me the pinup photographs of Farrah Fawcett and Cheryl Teagues, and also Jane Kennedy. However, this young woman is not those, models, actresses, again, from, sort of a certain kind of American culture.
from the second half of the 1970s. I mean, this is very much a young woman from Baltimore. I mean, I would even say from West Baltimore. But I wish you would, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm reading your thought, you stinker, you. This image was taken on Park Avenue, and I was walking up the street. And I walked by her. She was waiting for the bus. And I thought, I didn't just walk past that. She was gorgeous. So that thought occurred to me as well. So, and I was shooting, in those days, it was a 35 millimeter camera that I used, a Nikon F. So I did a 360, spun to the curve, and came around on her from the opposite direction, made my adjustments as I was spinning, and I started photographing. And I didn't talk to her at that point. I only talked to her after, I think, 6 or 7 frames that I had recorded. And then I said a couple of things because it was spontaneous. My pictures are generally, I don't post people. And I catch people in their activity, whatever it is that they're doing. And so I felt the connection immediately. So she just sat there and she looked at me and I looked at her. And I did think, you ought to be quite beautiful. And then we had conversation. I walked and I have never seen her again.
Can you say a little bit more about what the ethos is of the street photographer as they attempt to either draw out a particular kind of response or establish a particular kind of rapport with the subject? When I was teaching at Howard, Toni Morrison came one afternoon to talk to the students, and I wanted to get some shots of, the premier writer of her generation. And after about 2 photographs, Miss Morrison was finished having her picture taken and let me know in no uncertain terms that it was time to stop taking pictures. And I wonder how you, sort of deal with that situation, what the encounters are like. And again, this moment of building rapport.
Well, yes, I've had some unpleasant experiences. I have been verbally abused. I've been told and had people throw their hands up. But for the most part, I've never been hit, struck. I usually, verbally abused, yes, but that's the worst of it. I generally am direct. I am direct by nature, as you know. So and I won't shoot unless I am feeling it, that I'm driven to take pictures that particular day. So I will stick my camera in someone's face and I will take the pictures, and I've already taken usually what I want before I say anything. And I'll just take additional pictures only for them to get comfortable and to see if something else happens that I didn't anticipate. Because I anticipate what it is that I'm going to shoot and what I see. My mind's eye see it, and I see it in a square format, which is what I'm using exclusively now, or in a rectangular face format. And I'm thinking dark room when I'm taking the picture, so that I'm thinking chemistry to bring out the tonal qualities that I see on that spot. So with beauty, I was seeing her, a picture of her as I was taking it, because I saw a dark-skinned black woman that had smooth skin and dark hair, nice shape, the clothes that she was wearing, the top. So I was thinking the chemistry to bring out each element of that. I will talk to the person and I will, why are you looking evil? Or why are you so intense? Or I'll say something complimentary. Or many times it'll be, what was so funny? With catching a breeze. I remember asking them, what was so funny? But I will just go with the flow of the situation, and I don't let whatever happens deter me, because I have 30,000 negatives, and I've taken a lot of pictures, and it'll either work or it won't. Move on.
Can you say something about your own aesthetic sensibility connected to the, I suppose, like the social value of capturing brown-skinned Black people, dark brown-skinned Black people in formal portrait photography, and making a request of the American viewer to regard this subject as beautiful?
Well, I photograph ordinary people in everyday life. I do have an affinity for dark-skinned Black people because I'm dark-skinned. And I feel good about myself. And I've always noticed or been very sensitive of different reactions of people towards various skin-colored Black people. And, I just think that, no, I see everybody as for what they are, and I try to highlight the strength of what that is. And we're all in the world together. Black Lives Matter, social equities. Well, equal should be equal and should mean equal. And so I keep that in mind, but I want to show some people who aren't always highlighted and aren't always highlighted in a positive light.
I was thinking about some of the photography, and I went immediately, John, to another one of these sort of incredible compositions. The photography also seems to be addressing some strong issues of social class. I mean, you talk about sort of honoring and these moments of dignity. And we have the response of people vis-a-vis skin color and hue, and then we also have the strong response of people on the basis of what social class appearances would give us. Can you talk a little bit about this photograph and what it means to encounter people? You can make out wash in the background. What it means to encounter people who would seem to be on the margins of society.
Yes, this is the Urban Squire, 1983. It was powerful because he has so much detail and definition in his face and with the features, the nose, the eyes. I also get caught up technically. I know I was using a Bronica, a 2 1/4 square negative, which is a large, medium-sized negative. So I knew, oh boy, this is going to make a wonderful enlargement. The hat was a nice darkness to it, and that played off of the dark skin, and I was able to get natural light on his face so that it really highlighted the crevices in his face, the bags, the eyes, and so we were able to really highlight those things. And as you say, it's Pennsylvania Avenue, I believe, is where that was, and he has a sense of dignity about him, but he does seem not to be. It's a lower class situation there. And he just seemed to be existing, very polite guy and distinguished man. And so seeing him in that work environment of the wash, I remember my heart really was pounding because I feel the intensity of a moment when I take a picture. And that one, I took a deep breath so that I was steady and on it and was able to record what I saw.
It reminds me, maybe in a slightly different sort of context or way, of the Gordon Parks American Gothic photograph. The urban squire, the natural aristocrat, and again, this way that you captured sort of a dignity that can't be removed. That is emanating from within. And for me, part of what makes it such a remarkable photograph.
Thank you. Eye to eye. A lot of the portraits, the book what we were trying to do is to show portraits of Baltimore. Baltimore lives, Baltimore lives. And I just remember that I was in eye-to-eye contact through the lens, and we had it. And so when it's going on, that's a wonderful moment of time to record.
I was trying to make, a juxtaposition, I guess, with the shots from the 1970s and then from the new millennium or possibly even as early as the 1980s. It seemed to me, or I wanted to kind of, make a statement, John, if you allow me, right? But it seemed like that the images from the 1970s, were a bit softer, a bit kinder. That they were, again, reflective of like an internal kind of dignity, a natural honor, and moments of honoring people. Some of the more recent images, and maybe as soon as we get into the era of the Reagan Revolution, they are far more stark, and there's a sharpness, and then also when we think of maybe some of your urban landscape photographs, they also give you the suggestion of a particular kind of a despair and an individual who may be overwhelmed or overcome by some of these conditions.
I'm wondering if you talk about them, the subjects, or me, because time has moved on in those situations. And I'm a beneficiary of the Great Society of Johnson, President Johnson, of 65. And this particular picture, I think, 2007, I'm thinking, why are we still here? Why are we still, this is empowerment. And he doesn't look empowered. And my son that you tutored at Emory College, John Jr., who with Divinity School, you helped him. He was in the background. He really liked that minister, and Reverend Brian, I believe it is, in the
Sure.
and his wife, the First Lady. And so when I saw him, but I see this brother on that bench with the hole in his pants before it was stylish. And I was thinking of my son's words about that church, and I was thinking, but this has to be addressed. So this is sarcasm, in a word, for me. And yes, 65, the Great Society, I thought everything would get better. But it, in some ways, seems to have gotten worse. And that's the point of the statement.
Sort of connected to some of these points of view that can emerge from these photographs that are involving human subjects, or human subjects are always very important and very valuable to you, but they compete with the built environment. And I noticed in this photograph of the after the parade, and I should say you went the whole way with after the parade, and because it makes me think of Ford Maddox Ford and the novel Parade's End. And these people who have grown up and mastered the Victorian education environment, but then World War I comes through, and it's all bets are off, and all of a sudden, we have to, we move back to ambiguity, right? We don't have science can't help us, God can't help us, or religion can't help us, or these things have not been able to, sort of fulfill us in the ways that they promised to in the 19th century. Of course, if you're black in the 19th century, it's going to be a little bit different than it would be for, British aristocrat like Ford Maddox Ford. But here we are after the parade, after the celebration, the young woman, who is, one of the great dancers and baton twirlers that, we're known for. I mean, we have these extraordinary marching bands, and I hope that we do get a chance to do some more work on the marching bands. But she's coming into the frame, marching into the frame, perhaps a younger sister or a smaller, a younger comrade, is on her right shoulder. But when I looked at the photograph, I noticed that what's in focus is the trash can and the chain link fence. And so, talk to me about what we should be getting this.
Brother, you said it all. You hit the points that I hit. That's Division Street in West Baltimore, parallel to Pennsylvania Avenue. There were marching bands, and there's still marching bands where kids from those neighborhoods have been participating, I'd say 60, 70 years at least. And they had just performed, and I was walking up and down Division Street. But the lack of cleanliness, or the attempt to get it clean, and them returning from wherever they perform to that environment really hit me very strongly. Plus the row houses in the background and the symmetry of those structures. I thought that play off of each other really had a lot to say. You want youth to be involved in activities. You want that environment to be clean. More needs to go on with neighborhoods and neighborhood development. And so I played it off of each other with gray values, grays, and a little white, but not much white. And most of the gray values to highlight the feeling of the environment.
The photograph again, I mean, it's another one of these, it's an exceptional kind of encounter. And I wonder also, like what your sequence was, as you captured them, sort of moving into, what was like the zone of greatest intensity for you, where you take that deep breath, you get it ready to make your photograph. Something that I too have noticed about Baltimore rear spaces is that, the difference between making a photograph of the front of the house as opposed to the rear of the house, and the way that we get, sort of this multiplication of humanity that's possible once you're in the rear and you see the series of stoops going down into the alleys and the cross-secting streets, and you realize the immensity of human life here in the city. And of course, that's something that I also think is so important and valuable about your work. I mean, is that we are recuperating so much humanity that tends to be again kept in the backyard, to paraphrase Gwendolyn Brooks, but kept out of sight, kept in these places that are sort of zoned off or relegated.
Let me say this: a photograph is put together in much the same way that you read. Composition, in other words, from left to right, the way you would read, because that's the way you visually going to look. So when I took that picture, I saw her coming from not left to right, but from right to left. So I had to balance that with the trash can, because the person is going to look up at the photograph, and people tend to look at middles a lot of time and cheat. So since I know that how people look at things, that's put together to force you to see things and to take you into the top third of the picture so that you feel the balance. And so the composition is the sneaky way of controlling you to see many of the points that you highlighted. And I'm just saying, yeah, that was what we were trying to do. We were successful because you're saying it. And so you see it. I see you. I see them. We see them.
The comment about, the way that the eye, can move towards the middle, or you can over-concentrate about what the action is, directly in the center of the frame. And then, you begin to erase or sort of slide away, sort of the top and the bottom.
that is very helpful to me as I continue to look and to learn
from the photography. Let me ask you this too. Say maybe we had this comment on many of the photographs, but maybe just another. Take us through your the dark room. You've captured the images, and what is the print experience like for John Mayden, who, as much as you are a photographer, right, you're a master printer.
Yeah, it's an epic battle when I go in the dark room because I usually, my mind's eye know what I want, but how I'm gonna get there, time will tell. It depends on when I start printing what I encounter. So I will saturate pictures with a whole lot of time, and I play around with temperature because making a photograph is like cooking, time and temperature. And so I will burn certain areas to give you even richer blacks. And some of those digital people that enjoy that photography, I know that some digital in the printing process, it's ink. Other times it's dye. How long it lasts, you could have the highest of quality that I've seen that could last 150 years. But properly kept photographs, what I'm producing, I think, as you store in correct lighting and air temperature situations indefinitely. It'll be here a heck of a lot longer than I will, or 150 year of print that's dye-based. But I still think that in the dark room, you encounter valleys, but also peaks. And I just enjoyed that process because printing long time, saturating, burning something longer, it's the same process that's used with digital. It's only you're doing it mechanically in the darkroom, whereas a sensor is making the reading when you're doing it computerized. And so it's the same thing, and it's an improvement on it with digital, because once you have it, you can duplicate the exact thing, whereas if I have to reprint or print another one, make an additional print, if I don't do everything the exact same way, there'll be a difference.
So you mentioned burning portions of the image, and this is done with the chemicals that you use in
the burning is the amount of light that is coming through the head of the enlarger, projecting through the negative onto the photographic paper, through the film onto the photographic paper. So I usually will give more time. For example, with this particular photograph, the street, the pavement was given more time so that it would come through strongly. Her legs, the little dress, the details in the dress, the upper left-hand corner was burned longer so that it's rich. Whenever you have a print, you want the four corners of the print to be well toned so that it's printed deeply.
Richly informative corners.
Yes.
Let me put up another image that has so much more white, and maybe talk about why you like this one, because as I understand you go through a print process where you may actually produce a dozen images, maybe more.
That is correct. Yes, that, and this one, Speak Your Mind, Live For Today, I had photographed at that location on at least 3 different times that I have noticed, and under different summertime, wintertime, but bad weather was it. This was the bomb. And this is when I now just use a Hasselblad 120 film is what I was using. And I was driving and I jumped out of my car and I ran in the middle of the street and I saw the guy coming from my right, and I took a picture, and then I took another, and I fell down, but I held the camera on a straight plane, and I was having a great time, and then I noticed the traffic backup that I caused. And I have recognized that the snow had, the traveling cars had darkened the foreground. So the background was white snow because it had not been trampled that much, not that many passers-by. The sign, the letters are dark, but it's on the white background. And so everything was right. It's geometric. He was a design element. I wasn't trying to give any details of the man's face. It was what he was doing that was important to me. And I cropped out some of what was on the left side and on the right side and the left side because it was in material. That is right into what I felt so strongly about and what I had been seeing, but I wanted it played right as an element. The words are a element of it. The top part of it is an element of it, like a barbershop, and the symmetry, and the white and the dark. So it plays together.
How many shots did it take before he got dead center between the two, like the tribunal panels?
It was about two. I timed him. And I'm counting with him. And I'm just calming myself down, not trying to worry about being hit by a car because I'm in the middle of the street. And then once I got it, I knew it. And then I took a couple more just to be sure, but he's continuing to walk. And then I didn't have my composition. But I got it. And I was so happy. And then I ran back, jumped in my car with the door open, and drove off. And they thought, I'm sure people thought that man was crazy, but I was crazy happy.
This was one that also spoke to me of the way that the individual is consumed by, even in sort of a combination of a harsh pastoral wintertime and then the urban environment, the slush in the front. Again, the literate panels, the barbershop. We can even make out images of the stoop in the background, or enough of a sort of a brick escarpment or marble step to give us the vision of the storefront. But would you say that this one? Tell us what happened, John. I mean, you said Great Society, and it's unraveling. I won't keep saying who I think of as being the prince of the unraveling, but nonetheless, we seem to be moving from a certain kind of optimism with the portraits to ones where the natural landscape, the urban natural landscape, is capable of overtaking the individual.
I'm thinking I too have a little scholarship achievement with history, and in law, when you study law, you have to deal with history, certain elements of it. I'm frustrated, like people are right now, with social justice because we should be further than we are. And I think what you're highlighting is over time, I have looked, I've understood. I understand urban renewal from the earlier gentleman in the Stoops when you said I was softer. Well, at that point, I learned more about, I saw Pennsylvania Avenue demolished in those areas. I saw relocation benefits given to some people like those, both to the people as well as to the owners of the property. I saw new structures built. That was positive, but then I see more dilapidation, over 15,000 vacant properties in Baltimore. I see things getting worse than better. I know that slavery was abolished in 1865, that the 14th Amendment or due process with equal opportunity and access was passed in 1868. But then we have messed up situations that are still there now because things have not gotten better where everybody has had an equal access to things or opportunity to achieve. I realized that I was lucky because there was a window of opportunity during the Great Society where monies was available for my education, and I am thankful for it because it helped to make me what I am. But I'm also looking well, how about the opportunities for others? How about some of the more involved problems that exist out there? How are they being addressed? Are they being addressed? Does anyone care anymore? So I see that about the caring part of it, and I show it by showing people who frequently aren't seen. And that's who many of the people in Baltimore lives are, people who aren't seen. You walk by them, but you didn't see them. So I never stopped seeing, and I realized that. So here it is.
That's an excellent place, I think, for us to see if we have any questions from our audience. And maybe we do have one or two. Let's see. Well, here's a question, John. What advice do you have for white artists who want to better understand the Black experience and also ally themselves with the struggle for racial equality?
Good question. You have to follow your heart. And if you are you didn't say what art form that you practice. And so I say you ought to engage in what interests you. I have never stopped being engaged with the white community, if you want to call that. In fact, heck, I say the community, whether they be Black or white, and I engage myself. To become a lawyer, boy, I had to step apart from the Black community, and I'd have to engage anybody who was interested in me. I'm sure that you, questioner, have people of color that you know. Talk to them. Raise the question. Buy my book. See the images and see the full range of what's presented. But what I'm saying is something other than you interests you, pursue it. One last thing I'd like to say is I don't just or haven't just photographed the Black community. I've photographed working class white communities. It was the working class element of it that interests me. And I could understand the struggles of others beyond just my neighborhood and Black people, because all people struggle. And that is the part of life that I'd say I was born into, and I recognize it. So, and as for otherness, something other than you, that's always been everybody's inquisitive. So pursue what you are interested in and just go after it. You should.
You, John, dwell on, I don't know, is there any particular experience that you had with race that, was a turning point for you? I mean, not necessarily exclusively as an artist, but then also, professionally or as a person from this city?
The turning point was when I learned how to operate the camera and had my initial lessons in the darkroom, and I realized I could do this. That's all I needed, because then I just kept working at it and repetition and repetition. It's like all art forms where repetitions are what teach you and make you better. And so I just kept working at it until I perfected it.
And were you able to have advantages or resources and access with white relationships?
Yes, Mr. Campbell, who was the general manager of WMAR-TV. He was actually a mentor. He took me under his wing and gave me access. I could run around in WMAR-TV. They hired me as an apprentice reporter. And I was on the street. And that was prestigious, and I liked it. But when I learned about the camera, and I realized that interests me, and I saw it was a mechanism of expression for political things that I had been doing, and it was a way of saying, of bringing the message that I had been involved in until I was 19. I was 19 years of age when I started photographing. But up to then, I was politically active in social organizations, community organizations, and various things like that. This was a means of expression. So politics and government as a major in undergrad was natural because those things that I learned there, art gave a way of expressing it. Your base question. I walked in the art hall, sat in one class, and then declared it as a major. I told him, I can do this. And so I have gone through my life at various stages when I've got enough of a read on it. I know my capacity. And I can do this. I will do this. And so it opened up a new world.
Can I ask you a little bit about Baltimore history? Would you tell us about any artistic tradition, that inspired you from Pennsylvania Avenue? And then I was also thinking about, I'm forgetting the name of the photographer who's worked for the Afro and whose prints went into the Maryland Historical Society. It's a large collection of I think it's about 10,000 images. But did you get inspired by any of the local artists, or was there a tradition of Black artistry that spoke to you that also may have been ignored or overlooked?
Truth of the matter is, no. I was 19 when I started with photography. And it was only because I learned how to work. I learned that a camera consists of three basic components. You've got your lens, shutter speed, and your aperture. And if you balance those, then you can make a picture, and the picture shows what you see. And so photography was always personal to me. Now, I will tell you that once I became a photographer, I did go down to the Afro, and I was aware of its history. And I knew about Gordon Parks, of course, because everybody had Life magazine. And when you said photographer, Gordon Parks' name always came right behind that. And so when I exhibited with him through the Black Photographers Annual, I'm thinking, wow, this is historic for me. Because that guy that I used to sit around in the 60s, Tom Light, here's his work. But I never studied any artist from any. Terrence, it was a guy, Terrence, and I can't think of Terrence's last name, that lived on that side street behind the Afro, who used to paint and photography. I knew him, and I had stopped past his house, and he had these gigantic pictures of women, and I think it was Robert O. Terrence, but I just never studied anybody because it's the feeling inside of you that you're trying to unleash. And when I did start to study other photographers, when I studied in New York, and I was studying to see how they put their work together, but not the essence of. I knew what I wanted to photograph. I wanted to get better at expression. So I always focused, that's about me, with me, trying to make me better. But other guys, I would look to appreciate what they did And I accepted them on their terms when I look at others' work. But I never really studied people that helped to get me going, because once I realized, damn, this is something that I like and I can do this, I just kept running.
Maybe we have one other question. Well, I think we were right at the moment when we should have a pause. And once again, we want to encourage people to please take a look at Baltimore Lives, and you can find out more about the incredible portrait photography, urban landscape photography of John Clark Mayden. The conversation today will be archived somewhere on the Hopkins homepage, so you can also return to the conversation again if it suits you. And John, we want to thank you so much for joining us and for your relationship with the library and Billie Holiday Project for Liberation Arts. And we're delighted that everything is working so well. Congratulations again on your award.
Thank you, and I treasure my relationship with you.
Thanks very much, man. I feel the same way.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.